Hi, and welcome back to Mysteries Channel. Today we're going over Chapter 5 of the Adam and Eve story by Chan Tomas. We're going over the declassified version released by the CIA in 2013, and Chapter 5 is titled Genesis. It's basically going through and reinterpreting or retranslating Genesis 1, 2, and 3, and it's in bullet points. The entire thing is bullet pointed, so I think today I'm just going to read it to you because I don't want to change the interpretation that he had come up with. All right, so let's do this. All right, go from the CIA website to the actual link. All right, Genesis, 4,500,000,000 years ago. This regenesis, 11,500 years ago, both in the Bible. A translation interpretation of Genesis 1, 2, and 3 from a reconstruction of what the Naga must have been to give us the chapters as we have them in English. Then, retranslating directly from Naga to English, bypassing Greek and Hebrew. The Book of Genesis, chapters 1, 2, and 3. Said something right here, I don't know what that is. Genesis 1, 1. In the beginning, 4.5 billion years ago, the universe was created in God's great design, including was our sun and our planet Earth. 2. And during one of the many cataclysms that occurred during the Earth's history, this one being 11,500 years ago, the Earth's land were all inundated with raging waters and ravaged by horrendous winds, and the oceans were all dark and muddiness, and the ill wind thundered over the troubled waters also. 3. And as the storm abated, sunlight came back to the face of the earth, as God intended. 4. And while the Holocaust was abating, once more darkness and sunlight were reestablished and distinguishable, and it was good. 5. The sunlight was again daytime and darkness again nighttime, in accordance with God's design, and evening and morning made one day. 6. Again, God's original design was that there be a sky between the clouds and ocean. 7. And in accordance with God's design, the heavens were reestablished, and that the sky again stood between the clouds and the oceans, as the onslaught of the great storms abated. 8. And God's heavens were indeed reestablished, and that evening and morning were the beginning of the second day. 9. And God's design was that the land would not be entirely covered by the oceans as they were immediately following a cataclysm. So, the disrupted oceans, now settling, drained off the higher lands. 10. And in accordance with God's design, the dry land was earth, and the waters ocean, and once again it was reestablished and good, as God intended. 11. And since God's design was that the earth should bring forth grass and herbs, yielding their seed, and the fruit yielding fruit, containing its seed, and the earth was again reestablished. 12. Therefore the earth, being reestablished, brought forth grass and herbs, yielding their seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit containing its seed, and it was good, as God intended. 13. And the evening and the morning were the start of the third day. 14. In accordance with God's design, there were normally lights in the heavens, which served to indicate months and seasons and days and years. 15. Also they served to furnish light on the earth, as God intended. 16. And as the great fog lifted and the clouds broke, the sun and moon reappeared, and also the stars. 17. And once again, as God intended, they shone from the heavens. 18. And the sun and moon again were able to divide light and darkness, which was good. 19. And the evening and the morning were the start of the fourth day. 20. And it was God's will that some of every creature living and bird flying should survive the cataclysm, inundation. 21. Surviving then were great whales and every living creature of the sea, and every kind of winged fowl, and it was as God intended and good. 22. And they were blessed with God's original design to be fruitful and reproduce and replenish the oceans with sea life and the air with fowl. 23. And the evening and the morning were the start of the fifth day. 24. And it was God's will that some of every creature, cattle, and creeping thing, and beast of the earth should survive the cataclysm inundation. Surviving then were the beasts, the cattle, and everything that creeps on the earth, and it was as God intended and good. 26. And in accordance with God's design, man, who was created in the image God intended, also was to survive and have dominion over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all of earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. 27. So it was God's design that man, who was created in the image God intended, both male and female, would survive the cataclysmic inundation. 28. And they were blessed with God's original design to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and control it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. 29. And God's design was that man, being given every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which the fruit of the yielding tree seed, to man it should be for food. 30. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, wherein there is life, God's design was that the green herbs shall serve for food, and it was as God intended. 31. And everything which survived was as God had originally created, and still was in God's design, and was good. And the evening and the morning were beginning of the sixth day. Genesis 2:1. Thus the heavens and the earth were reestablished, all the host of them. 2. And on the seventh day the recovery from the Holocaust and flood were complete, and the seventh day brought rest from the fight for survival against the Holocaust and its after effects. 3. And the seventh day brought God's blessed peace, as the Holocaust had abated, leaving those of his creation who survived. 4. These are the same regenerations of the heavens and of the earth as they were reestablished after the tumble previous to the one of this history, when the Lord God reestablished the earth and the heavens. 5. And every plant of the field before that cataclysm was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not brought rain upon the earth in this region, and there was not a man to till the ground. 6. But there was this cataclysm, and the great inundations arose over the earth. 7. And it was God's will that man should rise up from the earth and keep the breath of life and remain a living soul. This is the story. 8. And it was God's will after the cataclysm that the continent eastward be established. And there in Eden lived the man of this story. 9. And from this land grew other civilizations on other lands, with the motherland in the midst of all being the seed of wisdom, of all knowing, both good and evil. 10. And the inundation destroyed Eden and left only its 4 offspring lands. Note, the next 4 verses are probably incorrect, with the true description locked in correct translations of Egypt's Book of the Dead and the missing portion of the Piri Reis map. 11. The first land is near the river Pison, which includes the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. 12. And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. 13. And the second land is near the river Gihon, the same land which includes the land of Ethiopia. 14. And the third land is near the river Hiddekel, that is the land toward the east of Assyria, and the fourth land is near the river Euphrates. 15. And it was God's province that the man was of Eden, where he lived and toiled. 16. And he was descended from the original mankind which settled that motherland. 17. And God's design was that the man was warned, although the motherland was the source of all knowledge, both good and evil, that if he stayed therein, surely he would die. 18. And it was God's design that the man should not be alone, therefore a mate should be his. 19. And God had originally created every beast of the field and fowl of the air, and in his name Adam named each one. 20. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field, but for Adam there was no mate. 21. For Adam's mate had died after giving birth to a child of Adam. 22. And the child of Adam was a female, made in the image God intended. 23. And Adam said, this child is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and she grew into womanhood. 24. Therefore the man was both the father and mother to her, and she abode with him, and they were one flesh. 25. And the climate there was warm, requiring little or no clothing. Genesis 3, the mother continent. 1. Now, at the time of the beginning of this story, the oceans were in their normal state of quietness, and it was known to the woman of this story that she was not descended from any of the peoples of the lands which sprang from the mother continent. 2. And God's design was that the woman would learn that the people of the offspring lands would live on. 3. But the people of the motherland from whom she had descended would surely all die. 4. And she knew that in spite of the impending inundation, she would not surely die. 5. For God's design was that from the day she was born, she was descended from the original mankind of the motherland and was destined to know all, to discern both good and evil. 6. And the woman, being of the motherland and being wise and good, knew that both she and her father were descended from the original mankind of the motherland. 7. And they both were wise, and they lived the good life. And it was that time of the year when some clothing was needed for warmth. 8. And in the cool of those days, when they were wandering to which of the offspring lands they should go, and God's presence was felt strongly by them. 9. Adam felt God's call. 10. And said, I have heard God's warnings since the summer, and I have feared, for I knew not where to find refuge. 11. And God's warning had come to him in the summer as a warning to leave the land of his ancestors. 12. And the man said, the woman who is my daughter and descendant of my ancestors gave me this knowledge. 13. And asked her, what gift of knowledge has God given you? And the woman said, I am of your ancestors and inherit their wisdom, and the coming inundations of the ocean has been made known to me. 14. And God's design was that the oceans would go inundate the lands and drown the cattle and all the beasts of the field and bury all dust. 15. And God has thus given me victory over the oceans, such that the seed of future generations is in you and me, for the oceans will drown all others. 16. And God's design was that although the inundation would greatly multiply her sorrows, she would even so bring forth children, as her love would be for her husband and his for her. 17. And unto Adam it was God's will that he heed the words of his daughter, and God's warning that though they be descendants of original mankind of the motherland, they should leave it, as it was destined for destruction. Were they to stay, surely they would regret it. 18. And where Adam was to go, the land would be difficult to farm, with thorns and thistles abounding. And even so, the herb of the field was to be their food. 19. By his own toil and sweat, he was destined to fight the fight for survival after the inundation, even to the end of his days, when he would return to Mother Earth, as it was earth man came from, and unto earth he shall return. 20. And after the inundation, Adam therefore made the woman his wife, and called her Eve, as she was to be the mother of all living from the motherland. 21. And again, after the inundation, as they were in a colder climate, it was God's design as part of their survival that they make coats of skin to be clothed. 22. And it was God's design that Adam should take with him the knowledge of good and evil from the motherland as he put forth and left in order to live. 23. Therefore, in accordance with God's will, he left the Garden of Eden to survive and live from the soil where he was to go. 24. So the man left, and the Garden of Eden was subject to a cataclysm of earth and fire, and the motherland lost its foundations and sank beneath the oceans. And that is the end of chapter 5, Genesis. That was chapter 5 of the Adam and Eve story. I really wish it had a little bit more reference to how he came to the reinterpretation as he saw it. I do find it's interesting, of course. I mean, it's crazy. Interesting. It just is. I don't think that if it goes against your belief system, you should take this in an offensive way. I think this man really just saw that there are so many ties from different belief systems, religions, and creation stories and myths from all around the world that he's trying to tie them together. So yeah, there you go. We'll try to go over maybe even the rest of the book tomorrow. Well, I hate making promises because I don't want to break them. So we'll see. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe if you're inclined to do so. All right, have a great day.